Arizona Territory, 1875. A bloodied woman stands on an auction block, sold like cattle to the highest bidder. The crowd roars with greed and cruelty until a lone cowboy steps forward with a promise that will change two lives forever. This is the story of Evelyn Ward and Cole Mercer, a tale of survival, courage, and unexpected love born from the darkest moment. Stay with me until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let us begin. The sun hung over Promise Creek, Arizona like a burning curse, bleaching the wooden buildings white and turning the dirt streets into rivers of dust. It was the kind of heat that made men mean and desperate, the kind that dried up mercy along with the water holes. On this particular afternoon in late August 1875, that merciless sun beat down on a scene that would haunt the town for years to come. The auction platform stood in the center of the square, a crude stage built from raw timber that still bore the marks of hasty construction. Around it, a crowd had gathered, miners with dust still clinging to their clothes, ranchers who'd ridden in from surrounding spreads, drifters and opportunists who'd heard there was something worth seeing. They pressed close, jostling for position, their voices rising in a cacophony of shouts and jeers. On that platform stood Evelyn Ward. Her dove-gray traveling dress, once fine Boston tailoring, hung in tatters. The high collar was torn, revealing scratches across her collarbone. Her dark hair, which should have been pinned in the neat style of an educated woman, fell wild around her shoulders, matted with dust and something darker. Blood traced a thin line from her temple down her cheek, dripping slowly onto the weathered boards beneath her feet. Her wrists bore the angry red marks of rope burns, and though she stood straight, shoulders back, chin raised, her legs trembled with exhaustion. She was 24 years old, and she was being sold. "Now, gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed across the square, amplified by years of practice and natural showmanship. He was a barrel-chested man named Silas Greer, with a red face and eyes that gleamed with the pleasure of a good sale. "What we have here is prime merchandise. City-bred, educated, can read and write, can cipher numbers. Would make a fine housekeeper, cook, or—" He let the sentence hang, and the crowd's laughter turned ugly. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she didn't lower her eyes. She'd learned in the past 3 days that showing fear only made it worse. "She's got some fire in her yet," someone shouted from the crowd, and more laughter erupted. "Indeed she does," Greer agreed, circling Evelyn like a predator. Spirited but breakable, fresh from the civilized East, was on her way to San Francisco, so I'm told, before fate intervened. He grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Her loss is your gain, gentlemen. Shall we start the bidding at $20? "10," someone called. "Look at her, she's half dead already." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists at her sides. 3 days ago, she'd been a teacher from Boston, traveling west to take a position at a young ladies' academy in San Francisco. She'd had a trunk full of books, a letter of introduction, and a future bright with possibility. Then the stagecoach had been attacked just outside Promise Creek. The memories came in flashes: gunfire, screaming horses, the driver's body tumbling from the box. The other passengers, a merchant and his wife, an elderly prospector, had been killed immediately. Only Evelyn had been spared, grabbed by rough hands and thrown across a saddle. She remembered laughing voices, the smell of whiskey and gunpowder, and then darkness as someone struck her across the head. When she'd awakened, she was in a root cellar, bound and gagged. Through the floorboards above, she heard men's voices arguing about what to do with her. "She's quality," one had said. "Could fetch a good price in Mexico." But another had disagreed. "Too risky crossing the border. Sell her here. Quick money, no questions." And so she'd been brought to Promise Creek, dragged to this platform, and offered to the highest bidder like a horse or a plot of land. $15. A grizzled miner pushed his way forward, leering up at her. "I'll give 15 and I'll make sure she earns every penny." The crowd roared with approval. Evelyn forced herself to breathe steadily, to not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She'd survived this long by finding steel in places she didn't know existed. She would survive this too, somehow. $15, Greer announced. "Do I hear 20? 20, called another voice, this one from a rancher with a cruel mouth and hands that flexed with anticipation. The bidding continued, climbing slowly. 25, so 30, 35. Each bid felt like another chain being wrapped around her future. Evelyn stared at the horizon beyond the crowd, at the mountains that rose in the distance, purple and impossibly far away. She thought of her father in Boston, of the schoolroom she'd imagined teaching in, of all the dreams that were dying in this dusty Arizona square. The blood from her temple had reached her chin now. She could taste its copper tang. In a strange way, the pain helped. It kept her focused, kept her from drifting into the numbness that threatened to swallow her whole. $40! The crowd was getting more excited now, sensing the competition heating up. 45! Then, just as the auctioneer was raising his gavel to seal the bid, a new voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, but something in its tone made the entire crowd pause. $50. The mob parted like water, and a man stepped forward. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and harder living. Dust covered his boots and the legs of his worn denim trousers. His shirt was faded blue chambray, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle. A battered hat shadowed his face, but Evelyn could see his jaw, strong and set with determination, and his eyes. Even from the platform, she could see those eyes. They were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a bit older, with the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life under the open sky. There was something about him that made the rowdy crowd settle, something that commanded attention without demanding it. $50, he repeated, his voice carrying easily now in the sudden quiet. He didn't look at the auctioneer or the other bidders. He looked only at Evelyn. Greer recovered quickly, his showman's instincts kicking in. $50 from the gentleman. Do I hear 55? 60. The cruel-mouthed rancher wasn't backing down. I've got first rights. I was bidding first. The tall cowboy's gaze finally shifted, landing on the rancher with a look that could have frozen water in July. 75. A murmur rippled through the crowd. $75 was serious money, more than most of these men made in 2 months. The rancher's face reddened, his pride warring with his pocketbook. 80, he shouted, but there was desperation in his voice now. The cowboy didn't hesitate. $100. The crowd exploded in shocked exclamations. Greer's eyes widened. This was more than he'd hoped to get. The rancher opened his mouth, then closed it, his face twisted with fury. But he didn't bid again. $100 was too much, even for pride. $100, Greer announced, his voice trembling with excitement. Going once, going twice. He raised his gavel high. In that moment, Evelyn found her voice. No! The word came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but in the silence it carried. I am not property. Every eye turned to her. The cowboy's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes, respect perhaps, or recognition. Greer laughed nervously. Now, miss. Let's not make this more difficult than I am not property, Evelyn repeated, louder this time. Her legs were shaking so hard she thought they might give out, but she kept her chin up. I am a citizen of the United States. I have rights. This is illegal. You cannot— She's right. The cowboy's voice cut across her protests, quiet but absolutely certain. He stepped closer to the platform, and now Evelyn could see his face fully. It was a hard face, carved by sun and wind, but not cruel. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled sometimes, though he wasn't smiling now. She's right, he repeated. This is illegal. But we both know the law is 50 miles away in Tucson, and by the time anyone gets there and back, she'll be long gone, probably across the border into Mexico. He looked directly at Greer. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take my $100, and I'm going to take this woman, and everyone here is going to pretend this was a legitimate sale of household services. Greer's face went pale, then red. Now see here. Or, the cowboy continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous, I can ride to Tucson myself, bring back the U.S. Marshal, and explain how you've been selling kidnapped women in this town, along with the names of every man here who placed a bid. His hand rested casually on the gun at his hip. Your choice. The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the wind whistling through the gaps in the platform boards. The crowd had gone very still. Greer swallowed hard. He was a showman and a criminal, but he wasn't stupid. This tall cowboy had just offered him a way out, a way that put $100 in his pocket and didn't end with him on the wrong end of a hanging rope. "Sold!" he announced quickly, bringing the gavel down with a crack. "To the gentleman for $100. Cash on the barrel, if you please." The cowboy pulled a leather purse from his pocket and counted out bills and coins with the same methodical precision he seemed to apply to everything. As he handed the money to Greer, the crowd began to disperse, quickly, guiltily, like accomplices fleeing a crime scene. Then he climbed the steps to the platform. Up close, he was even taller than Evelyn had thought. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Those gray eyes that had seemed so cold from a distance were warmer now, though still guarded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. Evelyn flinched back instinctively, and he paused. "Easy," he said softly, as if speaking to a frightened horse. "Just cutting the ropes. May I?" It took her a moment to understand, another moment to nod. Her wrists were still bound behind her back. She'd almost forgotten. The numbness had set in so completely. He moved behind her, and she felt the whisper of the blade as it sliced through the hemp. The pressure released, and blood rushed back into her hands with a painful tingling. She brought her arms forward, rubbing at the raw skin, and that's when the world tilted. She'd been standing on adrenaline and pure will, and now that the immediate danger had passed, her body was demanding payment. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if strong hands hadn't caught her shoulders. "Steady." His voice was close to her ear now, low and calm. "You're bleeding." "I know," she managed. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and distant. He turned her gently to face him, his hands still steadying her shoulders. Up close, she could see the details. The sun-weathered skin, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the stubble on his jaw. His eyes tracked over her face, cataloging injuries with what looked like practiced efficiency. "Head wound, rope burns, maybe bruised ribs from the way you're breathing. What else?" "Nothing." She shook her head and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her skull. "Nothing broken." "Good." He reached up and removed his hat, pressing it briefly to her bleeding temple before putting it back on his own head. Then he did something that surprised her. He stripped off his vest and draped it around her shoulders, covering the torn portions of her dress. The gesture was so unexpected, so kind, that Evelyn felt tears burn behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, not now, not in front of all these people. As if he could read her thoughts, the cowboy turned to address the few spectators who remained. His voice carried across the square, clear and cold as mountain water. "She's mine to protect now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. Anyone who follows us, threatens her, or even looks at her wrong will answer for it. We clear?" No one answered. No one dared. "Good." He looked back at Evelyn, and his voice softened. "Can you walk?" "Yes." She wasn't entirely sure it was true, but she'd be damned if she'd let him carry her away like some helpless damsel. She'd lost everything in the past 3 days. Her possessions, her plans, her dignity. She would hold on to her pride. He seemed to understand. He offered his arm instead, a gesture so courtly it seemed out of place in this rough frontier town. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, and together they descended the platform steps. A horse waited at the hitching post, a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. The cowboy untied the reins with one hand, keeping the other available to steady Evelyn. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. It seemed important to know. This man who had just paid $100 for her freedom, who had faced down a mob with nothing but steady words and steadier nerves. He glanced at her, and for the first time something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Cole," he said. "Cole Mercer." Evelyn Ward. Her voice was stronger now, though her legs still trembled. "Mr. Mercer, I want you to know I will repay you. Every dollar. I don't know how yet, but I will. I am not in your debt, and I am certainly not your property." Now he did smile, though it was barely more than a softening around his eyes. "Didn't figure you were Miss Ward. And call me Cole. We've been through enough in the past 10 minutes to skip the formalities." He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down. "Can you ride?" "I can learn." "Fair enough." His hand closed around hers, warm, calloused, reassuringly strong, and he pulled her up behind him in one smooth motion. "Hold on to my waist. It's about 5 miles to the ranch." Evelyn wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid reality of muscle and bone beneath the worn shirt. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and calm. Her own was racing, but for the first time in 3 days, it wasn't entirely from fear. As they rode out of Promise Creek, she looked back once at the town square, at the platform where she'd stood bleeding and terrified, certain her life was over. The sun was lower now, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. It was still brutally hot, but somehow the weight of it felt different, less like punishment, more like purification. "Thank you," she said softly, knowing he would hear her over the rhythm of the horse's hooves. Cole didn't answer immediately. They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind, following a dusty trail that wound between sage-covered hills. Finally, he spoke, his voice carried back to her on the wind. "No thanks needed, Miss Ward. What happened back there? That wasn't justice, and it wasn't right. I just did what any decent man would do." "I don't think that's true," Evelyn said. "Those other men, they were perfectly willing to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then maybe there aren't as many decent men as there should be." His voice had gone hard again. "But you're safe now. I give you my word." Evelyn believed him. She didn't know why. She'd known this man for all of 20 minutes, and in her experience, men's words were often worth less than the breath it took to speak them. But something about Cole Mercer inspired trust. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her on that platform, not with lust or greed, but with something that looked almost like recognition, as if he'd seen himself in her desperate situation. The landscape opened up as they rode, revealing the wild beauty of the Arizona territory. Massive rock formations rose in the distance, sculpted by wind and time into fantastic shapes. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels, their arms raised to the sky. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the horror of the past days, Evelyn felt something stir inside her. Not quite hope, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of hope. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My ranch, the Broken Creek. It's north of town, up in the foothills. Not much to look at, but it's honest land, and it's mine." He paused. "There's a woman there, May Thornton. She keeps house for me. She'll help you get cleaned up, get you some proper clothes. Then you can rest. And after that? After that, we'll figure out what comes next. One thing at a time, Miss Ward." Evelyn nodded against his back, though he couldn't see it. One thing at a time. She could manage that. She'd survived the stagecoach attack, survived 3 days of captivity, survived the auction. She could survive whatever came next. The sun was touching the horizon now, turning the sky into a canvas of orange and purple and deep, burning red. In Boston, Evelyn had read about western sunsets, but no description had prepared her for this, the sheer scale of it, the way it seemed to set the entire world on fire. "It's beautiful," she breathed. She felt Cole nod. "It is. Harsh and hard, but beautiful. Like most things worth having out here." They rode on as darkness gathered, following a trail that seemed to exist more in Cole's memory than in any visible markings. Evelyn's arms grew tired from holding on. Her head throbbed where she'd been struck, and her entire body ached. But she didn't complain. She'd show this quiet cowboy that she was stronger than she looked. When they finally crested a ridge and Evelyn saw the ranch spread out below, outlined against the last light of day, she felt an unexpected emotion rise in her chest. Relief, yes, but also something else. Something that felt almost like coming home, though that was impossible. She'd never seen this place before in her life. The ranch house was a long, low building made of adobe and wood, with a covered porch running along its front. Outbuildings clustered nearby, a barn, a corral, what looked like a bunkhouse. Smoke rose from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming. As they approached, the front door burst open and a woman emerged, backlit by the interior lamps. She was short and stout, wearing a practical dress and an apron, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Her hands went to her hips as she watched them approach. "Cole Mercer," she called out, her voice sharp as a whip crack. "Where have you been? Supper's been waiting this past hour and—" She stopped abruptly as Cole drew the horse to a halt, and she got a good look at Evelyn. "Lord have mercy, what happened?" "It's a long story, May." Cole dismounted and reached up to help Evelyn down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground, but he kept one arm around her waist, steadying her. "This is Miss Evelyn Ward. She's had a rough few days. Can you help her?" May's sharp eyes took in everything: the torn dress, the blood, the rope burns, the way Evelyn swayed despite Cole's support. Her expression softened immediately, and she hurried forward. "You poor child. Come with me. Cole, you put that horse away, and then you're going to tell me exactly what happened." She wrapped an arm around Evelyn's other side, and together they guided her toward the house. "I'm May Thornton, dear. I keep this place from falling into complete chaos. Let's get you inside and see to those wounds." Evelyn wanted to say something, to thank her, to explain, but her voice seemed to have dried up. She let herself be led inside into a large room that served as both kitchen and living area. A fire burned in the stone hearth despite the summer heat, and the smell of something savory cooking made her stomach clench with sudden, fierce hunger. May settled her into a chair at the long wooden table, then immediately set about gathering supplies: clean cloths, a basin of water, bandages, and a bottle of what was probably whiskey for disinfecting wounds. "Now then," May said, her voice brisk but kind, "let's see what we're dealing with. That head wound first, I think." As May began gently cleaning the blood from her face, Evelyn heard the door open and close as Cole came back inside. She was aware of him moving around the room, heard the clink of a coffee pot, the scrape of a chair. But she kept her eyes closed, focusing on May's gentle ministrations, on the incredible luxury of being safe, of being cared for. "This will sting," May warned, and then pressed whiskey-soaked cloth to the cut on her temple. Evelyn bit back a gasp, her hands clenching on the edge of the table. The sting faded to a burn, then to a manageable throb. May worked efficiently, cleaning and bandaging the head wound, then moving on to the rope burns on her wrists. "These are bad," May said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Someone tied you up good and tight. Cole, you want to tell me what's going on?" Cole had taken a seat across the table, a cup of coffee cradled in his hands. In the lamplight, Evelyn could see him more clearly, the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the set of his jaw that suggested he was wrestling with his own anger. "There was an auction in town," he said simply. "Miss Ward was being sold. I bought her freedom." May's hand stilled on Evelyn's wrists. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerous. "An auction. In Promise Creek. In 1875, with a marshal just 50 miles away in Tucson." "That's right." "And who exactly was running this auction?" "Silas Greer and a few others, but May—" Cole's voice held a warning. "It's done now. Miss Ward is safe. That's what matters." May made a sound that suggested she had plenty more to say on the subject, but she pressed her lips together and went back to tending Evelyn's wounds. "Well, you're safe now, at least. We'll get you cleaned up, fed, and into a proper bed. Everything else can wait until morning." Evelyn finally opened her eyes, looking from May to Cole. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why would you do this? Risk yourself? Spend that money? For a stranger?" Cole met her gaze steadily over the rim of his coffee cup. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because I've seen what happens when good people look the other way. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because nobody deserves what almost happened to you today." There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that spoke of personal experience. Evelyn wanted to ask, wanted to understand, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the adrenaline had fully worn off. May seemed to sense it. "That's enough talk for tonight. Cole, you help me get her upstairs to the spare room. Miss Ward, you look about ready to fall over." Between them, they got Evelyn up the narrow staircase to a small bedroom under the eaves. It was simply furnished, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand, a single chair. but to Evelyn it looked like the finest hotel suite. May helped her out of the ruined dress and into a clean nightgown, then tucked her into bed as if she were a child. "Sleep now," May said gently, smoothing the hair back from Evelyn's forehead. "You're safe here. Cole's given his word, and Cole Mercer's word is gold in these parts. Nobody's going to hurt you." As May left, taking the lamp with her, Evelyn lay in the darkness and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, wind sighing through the eaves, the distant call of night birds, the low murmur of voices from downstairs as Cole and May talked. She thought she should be afraid. She was in a strange place, dependent on the charity of people she'd just met. But somehow, impossibly, she felt safer than she had since leaving Boston. Cole Mercer had looked into her eyes and promised protection, and she believed him. As sleep finally pulled her under, her last conscious thought was of that moment on the platform. The quiet voice cutting through the chaos, the steady gray eyes, the simple declaration, "She's mine to protect now." For tonight, at least, that was enough. Morning came slowly to the Broken Creek Ranch, announced first by the distant crow of a rooster, then by the gentle sounds of May moving about downstairs. Evelyn woke in stages, confused at first by the unfamiliar ceiling, the weight of the quilt, the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up through the floorboards. Then memory crashed back, the auction, the blood, Cole Mercer's steady voice cutting through her terror. She sat up carefully, testing her body's response. Everything ached, but it was the dull ache of healing rather than fresh injury. Someone had left a pitcher of water and a basin on the washstand, along with a bar of soap that smelled faintly of lavender. Next to it lay a folded dress, simple brown calico, worn but clean and carefully mended. Evelyn rose and washed, moving slowly, discovering new bruises with each movement. The face that looked back at her from the small mirror above the washstand was barely recognizable. The bandage on her temple stood out white against her sun-reddened skin. Her eyes looked too large, haunted. But she was alive, and she was free, and that had to be enough. The dress fit reasonably well, if a bit loose in the bodice and short in the hem. May must have left it, probably one of her own from younger, slimmer days. Evelyn braided her hair as best she could with trembling fingers, pinned it up, and descended the stairs. May was at the stove, her back to the stairs, humming something low and tuneless as she worked. The kitchen table was set for 3, and through the window Evelyn could see the sun painting the distant mountains in shades of rose and gold. "Good morning," Evelyn said softly, not wanting to startle the older woman. May turned, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "Morning, child. How are you feeling?" "Sore. Confused. Grateful." Evelyn moved to the table, unsure whether she should sit or offer to help. "Mrs. Thornton, I want to thank you for... It's just May, and you'll do no such thing. Sit yourself down before you fall down. You need food and rest, in that order." May poured a cup of coffee and set it in front of Evelyn, then returned to the stove. "Cole's out with the horses. He'll be in shortly. Meantime, you and I can get acquainted properly." Evelyn wrapped her hands around the cup, letting its warmth seep into her palms. "I don't know how to repay you, either of you. What Cole did yesterday was what any decent man ought to do, though precious few would have." May cracked eggs into a pan with practiced efficiency. "But that's Cole. He sees something wrong. He fixes it. Been that way since he was a boy. You've known him a long time. Near about 20 years. I was housekeeper for his parents before they passed. Influenza took them both within a week of each other, winter of '68. Cole was barely 20, suddenly running a ranch by himself." May's voice softened. "He asked me to stay on, and I did. Someone had to keep him from working himself into an early grave." The door opened, bringing with it a gust of cool morning air and Cole himself. He'd clearly been working. There was dust on his clothes and sweat staining his shirt collar. When he saw Evelyn at the table, he paused, his expression unreadable. "Miss Ward, you're up. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you." It wasn't entirely true, but it seemed the right thing to say. "And please, call me Evelyn. After yesterday, I think we're beyond formality." Something that might have been approval flickered in his gray eyes. He hung his hat on a peg by the door and moved to the wash basin near the stove, rolling up his sleeves to scrub his hands and forearms. Evelyn found herself watching the economical movements, the way water darkened his sun-bronzed skin. May set plates on the table: eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and honey. More food than Evelyn had seen in days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly, to not appear desperate. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds, the clink of cutlery and the morning birdsong drifting through the open window. Finally, Cole set down his fork and looked at Evelyn directly. "We need to talk about what happened, about how you ended up on that platform." Evelyn set down her own fork, her appetite vanishing. But she'd known this conversation was coming. "I was on a stagecoach from Tucson to San Francisco. There were 4 of us: myself, a merchant named Harrison and his wife, and an older man, a prospector. We were attacked about 15 miles outside Promise Creek." "When was this?" 3 days ago. Morning. We'd stopped to rest the horses." The memories came reluctantly, each one edged with pain. "It happened so fast. One moment everything was normal, the next there was gunfire. The driver fell. Mr. Harrison tried to reach for a gun, but..." Her voice caught. "They shot him. They shot his wife when she screamed. The prospector tried to run, and they shot him too." Cole's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "And you?" "One of them grabbed me before I could run, threw me across his saddle. I tried to fight, tried to scream, but someone hit me." She touched the bandage on her temple. "When I woke up, I was in some kind of cellar. Root cellar, I think. I could hear them talking through the floorboards." "How many?" 4 men, I think. Maybe 5. It was hard to tell. I was only conscious for short periods, and they kept me gagged most of the time." Evelyn forced herself to meet Cole's eyes. "They argued about what to do with me. Some wanted to take me to Mexico. Others said it was too risky, that they should sell me here, that I'd fetch a good price because I was quality." The word tasted bitter in her mouth. May made a sound of disgust. "Animals. That's what they are." "Did you see any of their faces clearly?" Cole asked. "Could you identify them?" Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to remember details through the haze of fear and pain. "One of them had a scar. Here." She traced a line down her left cheek. "Another was very tall with a black beard, and there was a younger one. Couldn't have been more than 20. He seemed nervous, kept saying they should let me go." "But they didn't." "No, the scarred one was in charge. He said I was worth too much money to just turn loose." Evelyn opened her eyes, fighting down the nausea that rose at the memory. "On the 3rd day, they brought me to town, to that platform." Cole pushed back from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the landscape beyond. His shoulders were rigid with tension. "The Harding gang," he said finally. "Has to be. Scarred leader. That's Jack Harding. The tall one with the beard is probably his brother Tom. The young nervous one might be Danny, their nephew." "You know them?" Evelyn asked. "Know of them. They've been terrorizing this territory for 2 years. Stagecoach robberies, cattle rustling, worse." He turned back to face her, and his expression was grim. "They killed a family near Tombstone last year, parents and 3 children, burned the house down around them." May crossed herself, murmuring something that might have been a prayer. "The marshal's been after them," Cole continued, "but they're clever. They know this territory better than most, know where to hide. And they've got friends in low places, people who'll shelter them for a cut of the profits." "Like Silas Greer," May said darkly. "Like Greer," Cole agreed. "He's been suspected of dealing in stolen goods for years, but nothing's ever been proven. Selling a kidnapped woman." He shook his head. "That's a new low, even for him." Evelyn felt cold despite the warmth of the morning. "Do you think they'll come back? The Hardings, I mean. Will they look for me?" Cole returned to the table, his expression serious but not unkind. "I don't know. You're a witness now. You can identify them. That makes you dangerous to them. On the other hand, they got their money from Greer, and coming after you here means going through me. They might decide you're not worth the risk. Or they might decide that loose ends are too dangerous to leave hanging," May said quietly. "Don't sugarcoat it, Cole. The girl deserves to know the truth." "You're right." Cole's gray eyes met Evelyn's. "Yes, they might come back, which is why you're going to stay here, at least until we can figure out something safer." "I can't impose—" "It's not an imposition." His voice was firm. You were right yesterday when you said what happened was illegal. You're not my property, Evelyn. You're a free woman who's been through hell and needs a safe place to recover. I'm offering that place. No strings, no obligations beyond common courtesy. And when I've recovered, Evelyn asked, what then? Then we figure out next steps. You said you were heading to San Francisco. Teaching position? Yes. At the Brightwell Academy for Young Ladies. I had a letter of introduction, but it was in my trunk on the stagecoach, along with everything else I owned. The reality of her situation was becoming clear. She'd lost not just her possessions, but her entire future. I don't even know if the position is still available. I was supposed to arrive 2 days ago. We can send a telegram, May suggested. Explain what happened. Any reasonable person would understand. Maybe. But Evelyn wasn't so sure. What respectable academy would hire a woman who'd been kidnapped, sold at auction, and witnessed multiple murders? The scandal alone would be enough to close doors permanently. As if reading her thoughts, Cole said, "Don't borrow trouble. First things first, you need time to heal, time to think. The rest will sort itself out." And in the meantime, May added, standing to clear the plates, "You can make yourself useful around here if you've a mind to. Can you cook?" "Adequately. I'm better with books than with stoves." "Well, I can always use help with the mending. Lord knows coal goes through shirts faster than I can repair them. And if you're educated, like Greer said, maybe you can help with the ranch accounts. Cole's handy with horses and cattle, but numbers make him twitchy." "They do not," Cole protested, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. "I just prefer clear answers, and accounting is all guesswork and estimates." "It's arithmetic," Evelyn said. "Pure mathematics. Numbers don't lie." "See?" May grinned at Cole. "She can make sense of your ledgers. Girl's already earning her keep." The conversation moved to lighter topics, the ranch's operations, the upcoming cattle drive, the temperamental mare that Cole was trying to gentle. Evelyn found herself relaxing slightly, drawn into the easy banter between Cole and May. It reminded her of home, of her father's house in Boston, of a time when the world had made sense. But the peace was shattered by the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Cole was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the gun belt he'd hung by the door. May's expression went from warm to wary in a heartbeat. Evelyn remained frozen at the table, her heart hammering. "Stay here," Cole ordered, buckling on the gun belt as he moved to the window. He peered out, then his shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's Bill Crawford. He's alone." "The deputy?" May asked. "Former deputy. He gave up the badge last year." Cole opened the door as a rider pulled up in a spray of dust. "Bill, what brings you out here in such a hurry?" The man who dismounted was in his 50s, lean and weathered, with a silver star pinned to his vest, despite what Cole had said about giving up the badge. He looked past Cole into the house, his eyes finding Evelyn. "I need to talk to you, Cole, about what happened yesterday in town." "Come in." Cole stepped aside, and the deputy entered, removing his hat as he did so. Up close, Evelyn could see the lines of worry on his face, the gray in his mustache. "Miss Ward, I presume," Bill Crawford said. "I'm Deputy Bill Crawford, U.S. Marshal's office out of Tucson. I heard about the auction yesterday. Heard Cole bought your freedom." "That's right," Evelyn said carefully. "Are you here to arrest someone?" "That depends." Bill accepted the coffee May poured for him and took a seat at the table. "Tell me what happened, from the beginning. Everything." So Evelyn told the story again, with Cole and May adding details where necessary. Bill listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he sat back and let out a long breath. "The Harding gang, I thought as much. We've been after them for 2 years, and they keep slipping through our fingers like smoke." He looked at Cole. "You did the right thing yesterday, but you know it's complicated now. Technically, that auction was illegal, but proving it means getting testimonies from everyone who was there, and most of those folks aren't going to want to admit they were bidding on a kidnapped woman." "What about Greer?" May demanded. "Surely he can be charged." "With what?" "He'll claim he didn't know she was kidnapped, that he thought it was a legitimate indenture contract. Without proof otherwise, it's his word against hers." Bill's expression was apologetic. "I'm not saying I believe him. I don't. But the law requires evidence, and right now we don't have much." "We have my testimony," Evelyn said. "I can identify the men who took me, who killed those people on the stagecoach." "And that's valuable, but it's also dangerous." Bill leaned forward, his voice serious. Miss Ward, the Hardings are violent men. If they know you can identify them, they'll want you silenced. Permanently. The word hung in the air like a threat. Evelyn felt May's hand come to rest on her shoulder, warm and reassuring. So what do you suggest? Cole asked. She can't just hide forever. No, but she can stay hidden until we catch them. I've got word that the marshal himself is coming down from Tucson next week with a federal posse. If we can keep Miss Ward safe until then, we might be able to set a trap. Use her testimony to get warrants, then hunt them down properly. And if they come here first? Cole's voice was quiet but edged with steel. Then you defend yourself and Miss Ward with whatever force necessary. You're within your rights. Bill stood, settling his hat back on his head. I'm going to ride into Promise Creek now, ask some questions, see what I can learn. Cole, you keep your eyes open. Don't take any chances. I never do. You took a chance yesterday, walking into that auction. But Bill was smiling slightly. Though I'm glad you did. Not many men would have. After Bill left, the house felt somehow smaller, more vulnerable. Evelyn found herself glancing at the windows, wondering if every sound was a threat. Cole noticed. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something. He led her outside, across the dusty yard to the barn. Inside it smelled of hay and horses and leather, a good, honest smell. Several horses occupied the stalls, their heads turning curiously as Cole and Evelyn entered. Cole stopped at a stall near the back, where a small gray mare stood with her head lowered, clearly favoring one leg. This is Silver, he said. Found her 3 weeks ago up in the hills, leg caught in a crevice. She was half starved, terrified, wild as they come. Took me 2 days just to get close enough to free her. Evelyn watched as Cole opened the stall door and moved inside, speaking in low, soothing tones. The mare's ears flicked nervously, but she didn't bolt. She's healing, Cole continued, running his hand gently down the mare's injured leg. Slowly. The physical wounds are almost gone, but the fear, that takes longer. Every unexpected sound makes her jump. Every shadow might be a threat. But she's learning. Learning that not everything is dangerous, that there's safety here. He looked at Evelyn, and she understood. He was talking about the horse, but he was also talking about her. How long does it take, she asked, for the fear to go away? It doesn't, not entirely, but it becomes manageable. You learn to live with it, to function despite it. Cole gave Silver a final pat and exited the stall. And you learn that you're stronger than you think. Silver here, she survived in those hills for who knows how long, survived being trapped, survived being alone. She's tougher than she looks. Is this your way of telling me I'm tougher than I look? You survived a stagecoach massacre, survived 3 days with the Hardings, survived that auction without breaking. Cole's gray eyes were steady on hers. Yeah, Evelyn, you're a lot tougher than you look. They stood in the quiet barn, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of horses and the filtered sunlight coming through the gaps in the boards. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, not quite healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. Thank you, she said. For this. For everything. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. Cole smiled, a real smile this time, and Evelyn was struck by how it transformed his face. The hard edges softened, and she could see the kind man beneath the tough exterior. Come on, he said. May's probably got a list of chores for both of us by now. Woman runs this place like a sergeant major. As they walked back to the house, Evelyn found herself thinking about Silver the mare, about healing and fear and strength. She thought about the journey she'd started in Boston, a simple trip to a new teaching position, and how drastically it had changed. She'd lost everything, survived horrors she couldn't have imagined, and ended up here, on this dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere. But she was alive, and she was free. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build on. The next week passed in a strange kind of domestic routine. Evelyn helped May with household tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending, and discovered that she actually enjoyed the physical work. In Boston, she'd spent her days with books and lessons, her hands clean and soft. Here, she kneaded bread dough, scrubbed floors, planted vegetables in May's kitchen garden. Her hands grew rough, and her muscles ached, but there was satisfaction in it. In the evenings, she worked on the ranch accounts at Cole's request. The ledgers were a mess, not from dishonesty, but from simple neglect. Cole could track cattle and horses in his head, could remember which fence needed mending and which water source was running low, but translating that into organized numbers defeated him. "You sold 20 head to Morrison in June," Evelyn said one evening, looking up from the ledger with confusion. "But you only recorded 15 here." Cole looked up from the saddle he was oiling. "Did I? Morrison paid for 20, I'm sure of it." "Then you need to correct the entry, or your accounts will never balance." She dipped the pen and made the notation, her handwriting neat and precise. "And you bought grain in July, but there's no record of from whom or how much you paid. Jensen's Feed Store, $40. Evelyn added it to the ledger, shaking her head. "How do you run a business like this?" "By remembering what matters and trusting the rest will sort itself out." "That's not how accounting works." "Maybe not, but it's how ranching works." But he was grinning, and Evelyn found herself smiling back. May watched these exchanges with knowing eyes, but she said nothing. She simply went about her work, humming those tuneless songs, occasionally dropping comments that seemed innocent but carried weight. "It's nice having another woman in the house," she said one afternoon as she and Evelyn shelled peas on the porch. "Been too long since we had proper conversation." "You and Cole don't talk." "Oh, we talk, but Cole's a man of few words, and there's things men don't understand about women's conversation. The comfort of it." May's hands moved with practiced efficiency, splitting pods and extracting peas. "You're good for this place, Evelyn, good for Cole, even if he's too stubborn to see it yet." Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. "May, I'm not suggesting anything improper, just saying it's good for him to have someone besides an old woman for company. He spends too much time alone with his thoughts." May paused, her expression growing serious. "He's a good man, Evelyn, one of the best I've known, but he carries weight that isn't his to carry." "What do you mean?" May was quiet for a moment, debating how much to say. Finally, she spoke. "His parents' death hit him hard. He was barely more than a boy, suddenly responsible for everything. And there was a girl years back, Sarah Whitmore. They were going to marry." "What happened?" "She left, decided ranch life wasn't for her, that she wanted more than what Cole could offer. Broke his heart, though he'd never admit it." May looked at Evelyn directly. "Made him wary of trusting people, especially women who might want something different than this life." Evelyn understood the warning beneath the words. Don't hurt him. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't let him care if you're just going to leave. "I'm not planning to stay," she said carefully. "Once it's safe, I need to continue to San Francisco. I have a position waiting, a future planned." "Plans change," May said simply. "Life has a way of taking us where we need to be, not where we thought we wanted to go." That night, Evelyn lay in her small room under the eaves and thought about May's words. Did plans change, or did people? A month ago, she'd been certain of her path, teaching in San Francisco, building a career, living an independent, educated life. Now she was on a ranch in Arizona, sleeping in a borrowed nightgown, healing from trauma that had reshaped her understanding of the world. And she was thinking about Cole Mercer more than she should. She tried to tell herself it was simple gratitude, or the natural result of proximity. But she knew better. She'd begun to notice things, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle patience in his voice when he worked with the horses, the strength in his hands that could be either forceful or tender as the situation demanded. She thought about the $100 he'd paid for her freedom without hesitation, about the way he'd faced down that mob with nothing but steady words and steadier courage, about how he looked at her not with pity or lust, but with respect. It was dangerous, these feelings. She couldn't afford them. Once the marshal caught the Hardings, once it was safe, she would leave. She had to leave. Her entire future depended on it. But in the darkness, alone with her thoughts, she allowed herself to wonder, what if? The answer came 3 days later in the form of gunfire echoing across the ranch. Evelyn was in the kitchen with May, preparing lunch, when they heard it, distant but unmistakable. Both women froze. "Cole's at the south pasture," May said, her face going pale. "Checking the water source." More shots, closer now. Through the window, Evelyn saw dust rising on the road that led to the ranch. Riders, several of them, moving fast. May grabbed Evelyn's arm with surprising strength. Upstairs, now! The spare room has a lock on the door. Get in there and don't come out until I say. But now, girl! Evelyn ran, taking the stairs two at a time, her heart hammering. From the spare room window, she could see the riders more clearly now. 4 of them, riding hard toward the ranch house. And in the distance, a lone rider racing to intercept them, Cole. She watched as he drove his horse toward the house, watched as he fired his rifle. Not at the riders, but into the air, a warning shot. The riders split up, 2 heading toward the barn, 2 toward the house. Then May's voice, sharp and commanding. "This is private property. State your business or clear out." A man's laugh, cruel and confident. "We're looking for something that belongs to us." A woman. Boston lady who's got no business being here. Jack Harding. Even through the window, even without seeing his face clearly, Evelyn knew, the scarred leader. He'd come for her. "There's no one here but me and my ranch hand," May said, her voice steady despite the obvious lie. "You boys best move along before—" The sound of breaking glass cut her off. They were forcing their way in. Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling the scream that wanted to escape. She could hear boots on the stairs, doors being thrown open. They were searching the house. The doorknob to her room rattled, once, twice. Then a voice, frighteningly close, "This one's locked." A pause. Then a shoulder hitting the door hard. The frame shook but held. "Break it down," Harding ordered. Evelyn looked around frantically for a weapon, anything. Her fingers closed around the water pitcher on the washstand. Heavy ceramic, better than nothing. She positioned herself beside the door, heart racing, preparing to fight. Another hit to the door. Wood splintered. Then, from outside, a voice that cut through everything like a blade through silk. "Step away from the door." Cole. He'd reached the house. "This isn't your concern, Mercer," Harding called back. "Just hand over the woman and we'll be gone." "No." The single word hung in the air, absolute and final. "You're outnumbered. 4-1. Don't be stupid." "I've beaten worse odds for less important reasons." Cole's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Last chance. Right away now, or this ends badly for all of you." Silence. Evelyn held her breath, the pitcher clutched in her white-knuckled hands. Then Harding laughed, and the sound was like broken glass. "All right, cowboy, have it your way." The gunfire that followed seemed to last forever and no time at all. Evelyn crouched by the door, hearing shots, shouts, the sound of something, someone falling. She heard May's voice, sharp and angry, and another shot. Then silence. Evelyn waited, trembling, unsure whether to be terrified or relieved. Finally, footsteps on the stairs. Slow, measured. "Evelyn?" Cole's voice, rougher than usual. "It's me. You can come out now." She opened the door with shaking hands to find Cole standing in the hallway, bleeding from a cut on his left arm, his shirt torn. His gun was still in his hand. "Are you hurt?" she asked, moving toward him instinctively. "Just a graze." May caught worse. His eyes were dark with anger and something else. Fear, she realized. Fear for her. "They're gone. 2 dead, 2 ran. Harding was one of the runners. Coward left his men behind." Evelyn wanted to ask more, but her legs suddenly wouldn't support her. She sagged against the doorframe, and Cole was there, catching her, his arm strong and sure around her waist. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe. I've got you." And in that moment, with gun smoke still heavy in the air and violence echoing in her ears, Evelyn realized something that terrified her more than the Hardings ever could. She was falling in love with Cole Mercer, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. May was in the kitchen when they came downstairs, pressing a blood-soaked cloth to her shoulder. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set with determination. And when she saw Evelyn and Cole, she waved off their concern with her free hand. "It's nothing," she insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Bullet grazed me, that's all. I've had worse from ornery chickens." "Let me see." Cole was already moving toward her, his own injury forgotten. He peeled back the cloth carefully, and Evelyn saw the angry red furrow across May's upper arm. Not deep, but bleeding steadily. "I'll get the medical supplies," Evelyn said, grateful to have something to do, some way to be useful when her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She found the box where May had kept it after treating her own wounds. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been barely 2 weeks. As she returned to the kitchen, she saw the bodies through the window. 2 men lay in the yard, unmoving. One was the tall, bearded man she remembered from the root cellar. The other she didn't recognize, but his youth suggested he might have been Danny, the nervous nephew. Both had paid the ultimate price for following Jack Harding's orders. Cole followed her gaze. "Bill Crawford will need to be notified. And the marshal. This changes everything." "How?" Evelyn set the medical box on the table, her voice steadier than she felt. "They attacked us. Surely that's proof enough of what they've done." "It's proof they're willing to kill to keep you silent, which means they'll try again." Cole's jaw tightened as he cleaned May's wound with whiskey, ignoring her sharp intake of breath. "Harding and the other one got away. They know where you are now. They know I'm protecting you. Next time they'll come prepared." "Next time we'll be ready," May said through gritted teeth. "I'm not letting those bastards run us off our own land." "May. Don't you May me, Cole Mercer. I've lived through Apache raids and drought and the war. I'm not about to let some 2-bit outlaws scare me into hiding." She looked at Evelyn, her eyes fierce despite the pain. "And I'm not letting them get their hands on this girl. Not while there's breath in my body." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear this time, but from the fierce loyalty of this woman she'd known for such a short time. "I could leave," she said quietly. "Go somewhere else, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. I don't want to put you both in danger." "And where would you go?" Cole asked, bandaging May's arm with practiced efficiency. "You have no money, no transportation, no one to protect you. The Hardings have contacts throughout the territory. You wouldn't make it 20 miles before someone sold you out." "He's right," May added. "Your safest bet is staying here until the marshal arrives. At least here you've got 2 people who know how to shoot and aren't afraid to do it." The truth of their words settled over Evelyn like a heavy blanket. She was trapped, not by Cole or May, but by circumstance, by the violence of men who saw her as nothing more than a loose end to be eliminated. The freedom Cole had bought her on that auction platform was proving more complicated than simple liberation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought this to your door." Cole's hand closed over hers, warm and steady. "You didn't bring anything. The Hardings did. And they're the ones who'll pay for it." There was something in his voice, a dark promise that sent shivers down Evelyn's spine. This was a side of Cole she hadn't seen before, harder and more dangerous than the patient horse trainer or the careful rancher. This was the man who had faced down a mob to buy her freedom, who had just killed 2 men without hesitation to protect what was his. And she was his to protect. He'd said so on that platform, and he'd meant it. The realization should have frightened her, should have felt like another kind of captivity. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had since leaving Boston. Whatever was growing between them, gratitude, respect, something deeper, it was complicated by violence and necessity, but it was also undeniably real. Bill Crawford arrived within the hour, summoned by one of Cole's ranch hands who'd heard the gunfire from the north pasture. He surveyed the scene with grim efficiency, the bodies in the yard, the splintered door, May's bandaged arm, the bullet holes in the walls. "This is an act of war," he said, standing in the kitchen with his hat in his hands. "Federal charges, all of them. Murder, attempted murder, assault with deadly weapons. When the marshal gets here—" "When will that be?" Cole interrupted. "You said next week. That was yesterday. How long do we have to wait?" "He's due in 3 days. 4 at most." Bill looked at Evelyn with something like pity. "I know that feels like forever, miss, but it's the best we can do. In the meantime, I can station a deputy here if—" "No." Cole's voice was flat. "No offense, Bill, but your deputies are green kids with more enthusiasm than skill. They'd be more liability than help." "Then what do you suggest?" "We leave." The words hung in the air. May looked up sharply, and Evelyn felt her heart skip a beat. "Leave?" May said. "Cole, this is our home. We can't just—" "Not permanently. Just for a few days. Until the marshal arrives." Cole moved to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of land beyond the ranch. There's an old prospector's cabin up in the canyon country, about 20 miles north. My father used it sometimes during roundups. It's remote, defensible, and the Hardings don't know about it. We can hole up there until Bill brings the marshal. And leave the ranch unprotected? May's voice rose with indignation. Let them burn us out while we hide in the hills? I'll leave Charlie and the boys to watch the place. If anyone tries anything, they'll fire warning shots and ride for help. Cole turned back to face them, and Evelyn could see the logic working behind his eyes, the strategic planning. But Evelyn's the target, not the ranch. If she's not here, there's no reason for the Hardings to attack. They want to silence her before she can testify. Everything else is secondary. He's right, Bill said reluctantly. Much as I hate to admit it, the cabin idea is sound. You take Miss Ward and May somewhere safe, wait for the marshal. We'll bring him directly to you when he arrives. May opened her mouth to protest further, but Cole cut her off with a look. May, please. I can't protect both you and this ranch. Let me protect what matters most. Something in his tone made May's expression soften. She looked between Cole and Evelyn, and understanding dawned in her eyes. All right, she said finally, but I'm bringing my good skillet. I'm not cooking over a fire with some rusty old pan. Despite everything, the bodies outside, the blood, the fear, Evelyn felt a smile tug at her lips. May's practicality in the face of danger was somehow comforting. They spent the next hour preparing. Cole gathered supplies, food, water, ammunition, bedrolls, with military efficiency. May packed cooking equipment and medical supplies, muttering about stubborn men and their foolish heroics. Evelyn helped where she could, still shaky but determined not to be a burden. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, they loaded 2 horses. Cole would ride his bay gelding, Rex, while May and Evelyn would share a sturdy mare named Daisy. The canyon country was too rough for a wagon. Bill and the ranch hands gathered in the yard to see them off. Charlie, the oldest of the hands, was a grizzled veteran with a permanent squint and hands like leather. We'll keep watch, he promised Cole. Anyone comes sniffing around who shouldn't be here, we'll let them know they're not welcome. Don't take unnecessary risks, Cole warned. If it's the Hardings, just fire warning shots and ride for town. They're killers, Charlie. Don't underestimate them. I won't. Charlie's hand rested on the rifle slung across his saddle. You just keep those ladies safe. We'll handle things here. They rode out as the last light was fading, following a trail that led north into increasingly rough terrain. Evelyn sat behind May on Daisy, her arms wrapped around the older woman's waist, feeling every muscle in her body protest the movement. She wasn't used to riding, and the events of the day had left her exhausted. But she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't help, wouldn't change anything. All she could do was hold on and trust that Cole knew where he was leading them. The landscape changed as they climbed. The flat ranch land gave way to rolling hills, then to steeper slopes covered in piñon and juniper. Rock formations rose around them like ancient sentinels, carved by wind and water into impossible shapes. The temperature dropped as night fell, and Evelyn was grateful for the blanket May had insisted she wrap around her shoulders. They rode in silence, speaking only when necessary. Watch that low branch, or steep grade ahead. The night was full of sounds, coyotes calling, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats on stone. Above them, stars emerged in their thousands, more than Evelyn had ever seen in Boston, bright and cold and impossibly distant. She found herself watching Cole's silhouette ahead of them, the easy way he sat his horse, the alertness in his posture even as he guided them through the darkness. He'd killed 2 men today. She'd watched him do it, had heard the shots, had seen the results. It should have horrified her, should have made her fear him. Instead, all she felt was grateful, and guilty for that gratitude. Stop thinking so loud, May said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the horses. I can feel you churning back there. How can you tell what I'm thinking? I've been a woman for 63 years, girl. I know what it feels like when someone's tearing themselves apart over what they should feel versus what they do feel. May shifted in the saddle, adjusting her injured arm. Those men Cole killed today, they would have killed you. Killed me too, probably, just for getting in the way. You don't owe them guilt. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But you're educated and civilized, and you were raised to believe violence is never the answer. May's voice held understanding rather than judgment. Problem is, out here, sometimes violence is the only answer. Didn't make you any less of a good person to be grateful for it. Evelyn rested her forehead against May's back, letting the words sink in. The woman was right, as usual. The world out here operated by different rules than the drawing rooms and classrooms of Boston. Survival sometimes required hard choices, brutal choices. Cole had made those choices without hesitation, and both she and May were alive because of it. He cares about you, you know. May's voice was so quiet, Evelyn almost missed it. More than he wants to admit, maybe more than he realizes himself. But I see it. The way he looks at you when you're not watching, the way he's willing to abandon his ranch, his responsibilities, just to keep you safe. May, I can't. I shouldn't. Evelyn struggled for words. I'm leaving as soon as it's safe. I have to. My whole life, my career, it's all waiting in San Francisco. Is it? Or is it just an idea of a life, a plan you made before you knew there were other possibilities? May paused. I'm not saying you should stay. That's your choice to make. But don't run away just because you're scared of what you might feel if you let yourself consider it. Before Evelyn could respond, Cole raised his hand in a signal to stop. They halted, the horses stamping restlessly, and Evelyn felt May tense. What is it? May called quietly. Riders, behind us, about a mile back, maybe less. Cole's voice was tight. Could be nothing. Could be them. How can you tell? Evelyn whispered. Dust cloud, barely visible in the moonlight, and the way the nightbirds went quiet about 5 minutes ago. He turned Rex in a slow circle, scanning the darkness. We need to move faster. The cabin's still 3 miles ahead, and if they catch us in the open... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They urged the horses into a faster pace, as fast as they dared in the darkness on unfamiliar terrain. Evelyn clung to May, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound could be pursuing hoofbeats. The trail narrowed, winding between towering rock walls that blocked out the stars. They were in a canyon now, she realized. The canyon country Cole had mentioned. The path was barely wide enough for the horses, and the walls rose 50 feet or more on either side. This is bad terrain for a chase, May muttered. If they catch us here, they won't. But Cole's voice held a note of uncertainty. Half a mile more, and the canyon opens up. There's a rockfall we can use for cover if we have to. The sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them now, unmistakable and growing closer. 2 horses, maybe 3, moving fast, heedless of the danger. Cole! May's voice was sharp with warning. I know, hold on. They burst out of the narrow canyon into a wider space, not quite a valley, but a bowl-shaped depression surrounded by cliffs. And there, just as Cole had promised, was a tumble of massive boulders that had fallen from the heights in some ancient geological event. Behind the rocks! Cole wheeled Rex toward the rockfall, and Daisy followed. They dismounted in a scramble, May wincing as her injured shoulder protested. Cole pulled his rifle from its scabbard and positioned himself behind a boulder that offered a view of the canyon mouth. Stay down, he ordered. Both of you. No matter what happens, stay down. Evelyn crouched beside May, her breath coming in short gasps. In the moonlight, she could see May's face was pale with pain, but the older woman had drawn a small pistol from somewhere in her skirts and held it with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls. Then 2 riders burst into the open, dark silhouettes against the starbright sky. They pulled up short when they saw the rockfall, and Evelyn heard voices, though she couldn't make out the words. That's far enough, Cole's voice rang out, amplified by the rock walls. You're on my trail, in my territory, and I don't take kindly to being followed. One of the riders laughed, a sound Evelyn recognized with cold certainty. Jack Harding. Your trail, your territory, this is federal land, Mercer. Belongs to everyone. Harding's voice carried easily across the space. We're just traveling through. No law against that. There's a law against murder, against kidnapping, against selling stolen women like cattle. Cole's rifle was steady, aimed at Harding's chest. 2 of your men are dead back at my ranch. Bill Crawford's got their bodies and their identifications. The federal marshal will be here in 3 days. You might want to use that time to run as far and fast as you can. Or, Harding said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, we could finish what we started. Kill you, kill the old woman, kill the Boston girl. No witnesses, no testimony, no problem. You could try. The 2 words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Evelyn saw Harding's hand move toward his gun, saw Cole's finger tighten on the trigger. Then the second rider spoke, and his voice was younger, frightened. Jack, this is crazy. They're waiting for us. They're dug in. We should go, head for Mexico like we planned. Shut up, Tom. No, I won't shut up. Danny's dead because of your stubbornness. I'm not dying too. Not for this. Tom's horse danced nervously. I'm out. You want to get yourself killed? That's your business. But I'm done. You yellow-bellied. I'm smart, is what I am. Smart enough to know when the odds are against me. Tom wheeled his horse around. Good luck, Jack. You're going to need it. He spurred his horse back toward the canyon, and the sound of hoofbeats faded quickly. Jack Harding sat alone on his horse, his silhouette rigid with fury. Looks like it's just you now, Cole said. 1 against 3. How do you like those odds? For a long moment, Harding didn't move. Evelyn could feel the tension, could sense the calculation going on behind his scarred face. He was weighing his chances, deciding whether pride was worth dying for. Finally, he spat into the dust. This isn't over, Mercer. Not by a long shot. That girl's seen my face, knows my name. As long as she's alive, I'm hunted. So I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. You're wrong. Cole's voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty. You've got your life to lose, and you'll lose it the moment you make a move toward her. I promise you that. We'll see. Harding pulled his horse around, but slowly, keeping his eyes on the rockfall. We'll see who's left standing when the dust settles. He rode back into the canyon, disappearing into the darkness. But his threat lingered, hanging in the air like smoke. Cole waited, rifle still raised, for a full 5 minutes after the hoofbeats faded. Finally, he lowered the weapon and turned to May and Evelyn. He'll be back, May said flatly. Man like that doesn't know when to quit. I know, but not tonight. He's alone now and he knows we're ready for him. He'll regroup, maybe try to find Tom and convince him to come back. That buys us time. Cole moved to the horses, checking their gear. We need to reach the cabin tonight, get settled in. Once we're there, we'll have the advantage. High ground, good sight lines, defensible position. They mounted again, but this time Cole led them on a different path, one that wound higher into the hills. Evelyn could feel exhaustion pulling at her, making her limbs heavy and her thoughts slow. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was wearing off, leaving only bone-deep weariness. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, May was shaking her gently. We're here, child. Wake up. Evelyn opened her eyes to find them in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. A structure stood at the far end, barely more than a shack, really, built against a cliff face. Rough-hewn logs, a sagging porch, windows covered with shutters. But it looked solid, and more importantly, it looked defensible. Cole was already dismounting, moving to help May and Evelyn down. Evelyn's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Cole's arm came around her waist, steadying her. Easy. It's been a long ride. His voice was gentle, concern softening the hard edges that had been there during the confrontation. Let's get you inside. May, can you manage the horses? I'm wounded, not helpless, May retorted, but there was affection beneath the tartness. Go on, get her settled. I'll handle the animals. Cole guided Evelyn to the cabin, kicked open the door, which creaked on protesting hinges, and led her inside. In the moonlight filtering through the gaps in the shutters, she could make out a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, 2 cots against the far wall, and not much else. It's not much, Cole said, almost apologetically, but it's shelter, and it's safe. It's perfect, Evelyn said, and meant it. She didn't care about comfort or amenities. She cared about walls between her and Jack Harding, about Cole's steady presence, about the chance to rest without fear. Cole lit a lantern he found on the table, and warm light filled the small space. Now Evelyn could see the details. Old cooking equipment hanging from pegs, a stack of firewood, cobwebs in the corners. The cabin had clearly been unused for months, maybe years, but it was solid, protected. May came in carrying their supplies, and together they set about making the space livable. Cole built a fire while May unpacked food and blankets. Evelyn wanted to help, but her body was reaching the end of its endurance. She sank onto one of the cots, and the world tilted. "Head down," Cole ordered, his hand pressing gently on the back of her neck. "You're pale as a ghost. When's the last time you ate?" Evelyn tried to remember. Breakfast felt like days ago. "I don't know." "May, water and food, now." Within minutes, May pressed a cup of water into Evelyn's hands and made her drink. Then came dried meat and hard biscuits, rough trail food, but Evelyn ate mechanically, forcing her body to accept the fuel it needed. "Better," Cole said, watching her with those steady gray eyes. "Color's coming back. You scared me there for a minute." "I scared myself." Evelyn managed a weak smile. "I'm not used to this. Any of this." A month ago, my biggest challenge was deciding which textbook to use for teaching grammar. A month ago, my biggest challenge was a stubborn mare who wouldn't take a saddle. Funny how fast things change. Cole sat on the other cot, facing her across the small space. "You're doing better than you think, Evelyn. Most people would have broken by now." "I feel broken." "But you're not. You're here. You're fighting. You're surviving. That takes strength most people don't have." May banked the fire and settled onto the cot beside Evelyn with a groan. "Well, this isn't how I expected to spend my evening, but I've slept in worse places. During the war, I spent 3 nights in a root cellar with 6 other families and a very unhappy pig." Despite everything, Evelyn found herself smiling. "A pig?" "Mrs. Henderson's prize sow. She wouldn't leave it behind when the soldiers came through. That pig squealed for 3 solid days, thought I'd lose my mind." May stretched out, favoring her injured shoulder. "This is luxury by comparison." They lay in the darkness, listening to the fire crackle and the wind whisper through the pines outside. Evelyn's mind was too full for sleep, too many questions, too many fears, too many emotions she couldn't name. "Cole?" she said quietly, not sure if he was still awake. "Yeah?" "Why did you do it, really? At the auction, you could have walked away. It wasn't your fight, but you stepped forward anyway. Why?" Silence for a long moment. Then his voice came out of the darkness, rough with something that might have been memory. "When I was 12, my father and I went into Tucson for supplies. There was a man there, drunk, beating a woman in the street. His wife, people said. Everyone just watched, stepped around them, pretended not to see." Cole paused. "My father didn't. He stepped in, stopped it. Got a black eye for his trouble, but he stopped it. And afterward I asked him the same question you just asked me. Why risk yourself for a stranger?" "What did he say?" "He said the world is full of people who look away, who tell themselves it's not their problem, not their responsibility. But every time a good person looks away, evil gets a little stronger. So we don't look away. We step forward. We do what's right, even when it's hard, even when it costs us." Cole's voice softened. "I saw you on that platform, bleeding and terrified, but still standing straight, still fighting, and I thought about my father, about all the times he stepped forward when others looked away, and I knew I couldn't be one of the ones who walked past." Evelyn felt tears slip down her cheeks, hot and silent. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being the kind of man who steps forward. Thank you for being the kind of woman worth stepping forward for." May's voice came from the darkness, thick with sleep but warm with affection. "You two are going to make me cry, and I don't cry. Now hush up and get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." Evelyn closed her eyes, but sleep remained elusive. She was intensely aware of Cole's presence just feet away, of the steady rhythm of his breathing, of the safety his nearness provided. She thought about what May had said earlier, about feelings and choices and different lives than the one she'd planned. And she thought about Cole's story, about his father, about stepping forward. She'd spent her whole life preparing for a future that made sense, that was safe and predictable, teaching, independence, respectability. But none of that had prepared her for this, for violence and danger, for cowboys who bought freedom and women who fought with pistols drawn, for finding strength she didn't know she possessed. San Francisco felt very far away, and for the first time since leaving Boston, Evelyn wasn't entirely sure she wanted to reach it. Dawn broke over the canyon with startling beauty, painting the rock faces in shades of coral and gold. Evelyn woke to find pale light streaming through the gaps in the shutters and the smell of coffee brewing over the fire. May was already up, moving quietly around the small space, and through the open door Evelyn could see Cole standing on the porch, rifle in hand, watching the trail below. She rose stiffly, every muscle protesting yesterday's ride and the primitive sleeping arrangements. But she was alive and safe, and the morning felt almost peaceful despite the threat that had driven them here. "Coffee?" May offered, holding out a tin cup. "It's strong enough to strip paint, but it'll wake you up." Evelyn accepted gratefully, wrapping her hands around the cup's warmth. The coffee was indeed strong, bitter, and hot, but it cleared the fog from her mind. She moved to the doorway, standing just inside, watching Cole's silhouette against the brightening sky. He stood perfectly still, like a statue carved from the same stone as the surrounding cliffs. But Evelyn could see the alertness in his posture, the way his eyes constantly scanned the landscape below. He hadn't relaxed his guard even for a moment. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked quietly. Cole turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. "Some. Enough." "That's not an answer." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, I suppose it's not." He lowered the rifle, leaning it against the porch rail, and rolled his shoulders to ease the stiffness. "I dozed a few hours. May took watch around 3. Between us, we kept eyes on the approaches. You should rest properly. You can't stay alert forever." "I can stay alert long enough." But there were lines of fatigue around his eyes, and his movements were slower than usual. "Besides, daylight makes it easier. We'll see them coming from a mile away up here." May appeared in the doorway with her own coffee, surveying Cole with a critical eye. "You look like death warmed over." "Go lie down for a few hours. Evelyn and I can watch." "May, don't argue with me, boy. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Go on. We'll wake you if there's trouble." When Cole hesitated, May's voice softened. "Trust us. We're not helpless. And you taught me to shoot well enough to hit what I'm aiming at." Cole looked between them, clearly torn between duty and necessity. Finally he nodded. 2 hours. Wake me in 2 hours. No matter what." 3, May countered. "You need proper rest, not a nap." 2.5. Final offer." May snorted but nodded. "Deal. Now go before I change my mind and make you sleep for 4. Cole retreated into the cabin, and Evelyn heard the creak of the cot as he stretched out. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep, the sleep of someone so exhausted they could no longer fight it. May settled into the chair Cole had vacated, her pistol laid across her lap, and gestured for Evelyn to sit on the porch steps. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and stone. Birds were waking, calling to each other across the canyon, and somewhere in the distance, Evelyn heard water running. "There's a spring about 100 yards east," May said, following her gaze. "Good, clean water. Cole's father chose this spot specifically for it. Water and high ground, the 2 most important things for survival out here." "You loved them," Evelyn said. "Cole's parents." "Like they were my own family." May's expression grew distant with memory. "Thomas Mercer was a good man, fair, honest, hardworking. And his wife Helen, she was a lady in the truest sense, educated like you, but she understood that out here, education means knowing which plants are edible and how to deliver a calf, not just book learning." She smiled. "They loved this land, and they loved their son. Losing them broke something in Cole, made him harder, more careful with his heart." "Because of the girl, Sarah." May's eyes sharpened. "I mentioned her, didn't I?" "Yes. Sarah Whitmore. Pretty thing, all golden hair and big blue eyes. Cole was smitten from the moment he met her, proposed within 6 months." She paused, sipping her coffee. "But Sarah wasn't made for this life. She wanted parties and pretty dresses, wanted to live in town where there were people and society. The ranch felt like a prison to her, so she left. Told Cole she couldn't marry a man who loved dirt and cattle more than he could love her. That's not fair, Evelyn said, feeling an unexpected surge of anger on Cole's behalf. He would have loved her. He did love her. Yes, he did, but not the way she wanted to be loved. Cole's love is quiet, steady, practical. It shows itself in actions, not words, in protection and provision, not poetry. Well, May looked at Evelyn directly. Some women need the poetry. Some women understand that the other kind of love, the quiet kind, is worth more than all the pretty words in the world. The implication hung between them, and Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. May, we're not. Aren't you? May's voice was gentle but knowing. Child, I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching, and I've seen the way he looks at you. Something's growing there, whether either of you wants to admit it or not. It doesn't matter what's growing. I can't stay here. Evelyn's voice caught on the words. My whole life I've worked toward independence, education, career, respect in my field. If I give that up, if I stay here and become a rancher's wife, I lose everything I've worked for. Or maybe you gained something you didn't know you needed. May set down her cup and reached for Evelyn's hand. I'm not saying you should give up your dreams, but maybe your dreams can change shape without disappearing entirely. You're educated. That doesn't go away just because you're in Arizona instead of California. You could teach here. Lord knows Promise Creek needs a proper school teacher, or you could write, or start a library, or do a dozen other things that use your mind and your talents. As Cole's wife, Evelyn said quietly, as your own woman who happens to love a good man. May squeezed her hand. I'm not telling you what to do. That's your choice, and yours alone. But don't make it out of fear. Don't run away from something real just because it's not what you planned. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun climb higher, burning off the morning chill. Evelyn thought about May's words, about plans and choices and different kinds of love. She thought about Cole's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd stepped forward when others looked away. And she thought about the woman she'd been a month ago, certain, focused, independent, and the woman she was becoming. Harder, yes, but also more honest, more aware of what truly mattered. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the peace. Both women were on their feet instantly, May's pistol in her hand, Evelyn grabbing the rifle that leaned against the porch rail. The shot had come from the canyon below, echoing off the rock walls. Cole burst through the door, his own gun drawn, moving with the speed of a man jolted from sleep directly into danger. Where? Below, southeast. May's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. Single shot. Could be a hunter. Or a signal. Cole moved to the edge of the porch, scanning the landscape with eyes that were suddenly completely alert. There. See the dust? Evelyn followed his pointing finger and saw it, a small cloud of dust rising from the canyon floor, moving toward them. Riders. Multiple riders. How many? May asked. Can't tell yet. At least 3, maybe more. Cole's jaw tightened. They're coming up the trail. We've got maybe 15 minutes before they reach the cabin. Then we'd better be ready. May checked her pistol, her movements calm and practiced. Evelyn, you know how to shoot that rifle? Cole taught me the basics at the ranch. Good enough. You take the north window, I'll take the south. Cole, you've got the door. May's voice held the command of someone who'd lived through conflicts before. We make it clear they're not welcome. Warning shots first. If they keep coming, we aim to wound. If they fire on us, we fire back with intent. They moved into position, and Evelyn found herself at a window with a clear view of the approaching trail. Her hands shook as she positioned the rifle, remembering Cole's instructions. Sight down the barrel, breathe steady, squeeze the trigger gently rather than pulling. She'd never fired at a person before. Never imagined she would. But as she watched those riders approach, she knew she would do it if necessary. To protect May, to protect Cole, to protect herself. She'd come too far, survived too much, to let Jack Harding destroy her now. The riders came into clearer view, 5 of them, riding in a loose formation, and at the front, even at this distance, Evelyn recognized Jack Harding's silhouette. He brought friends, Cole said grimly. Tom must have decided blood was thicker than common sense. And those other three, probably men he's worked with before. Men who owe him or fear him enough to follow. 5 against 3, May observed. I've faced worse odds. So have I, but I'd rather not test them if we can avoid it. Cole raised his voice, projecting it down the canyon. That's far enough, Harding. This is private property. Turn around and ride away. The riders stopped, but they didn't turn around. Harding urged his horse forward a few steps, bringing him into better view. Even from this distance, Evelyn could see the scarred side of his face, could sense the rage radiating from him. Private property? Harding's voice echoed up. Funny. I don't see any posted signs. Far as I'm concerned, this is open range. Then I'm posting it now. You and your men have 30 seconds to clear out before we start shooting. Big talk from a man who's outnumbered and outgunned. But there was uncertainty in Harding's voice. He couldn't see how many people were in the cabin, couldn't know what weapons they had. Tell you what, Mercer, send out the girl and we'll leave peaceful. No one else has to get hurt. Not a chance. Then you're condemning that old woman to death. And yourself. All for some Boston lady who's not worth the trouble. Harding's voice rose with frustration. Be reasonable, man. She's nobody to you. Just a woman you bought at auction. Let her go and save yourself. Cole's response was quiet, but carried absolute conviction. She's mine to protect. I said so on that platform, and I meant it. You want her, you go through me. And I promise you, Harding, that's not a fight you'll walk away from. 5 against 1, 5 against 3, May called out. And we're dug in with the high ground and enough ammunition to hold off an army. You really want to test us? Silence. Evelyn could see Harding conferring with his men, gesturing, arguing. One of them, probably Tom, looked ready to bolt. Another kept glancing nervously at the cabin, clearly unhappy with the situation. Finally, Harding turned back. I'll give you a choice, Mercer. A fair fight. You and me, out in the open. Winner takes all. You win, we ride away and never bother any of you again. I win. I take the girl. No! Evelyn's voice rang out before she could stop herself. Cole, don't! It's a trap! She's right, May added. The moment you step out there, his men will shoot you down. Maybe. Cole's eyes never left Harding. Or maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe he wants to settle this man to man. You can't trust him. I don't. But I also can't keep you trapped in this cabin forever, and I can't fight a siege against 5 men. They'll eventually starve us out or burn us out. Cole glanced at Evelyn, and in his eyes she saw apology and determination in equal measure. This might be our best chance. It's suicide, May said flatly. I won't let you do it. It's not your choice to make. Cole checked his gun, his movements methodical. If I don't do this now, it ends in bloodshed anyway. At least this way there's a chance. Cole, please. Evelyn moved toward him, her heart hammering with fear. Please don't do this. We can wait. The marshal will be here in 2 days. We can hold out that long. He turned to face her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was affection there, and regret, and something deeper that she couldn't name. Evelyn, listen to me. Harding's not going to wait 2 days. He can't. Every hour that passes is another hour for the law to close in on him. He'll attack today, probably within the next few hours, and when he does, people are going to die. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I can't let that be you, or May. If there's a chance to end this without that, I have to take it. Even if it costs your life? Especially then, because my life is worth trading for yours. Always. The words hung in the air, laden with meaning that went far beyond simple protection. Evelyn saw May turn away, giving them a moment of privacy, and she realized with stunning clarity that Cole was saying goodbye. Just in case. I won't let you, she whispered. I won't let you die for me. You don't get a vote. But his voice was gentle, and his hand was still on her cheek, warm and steady. Evelyn, if I don't walk out of this, if the worst happens, I want you to know something. These past weeks, having you here, watching you heal and grow stronger, seeing your courage and your stubbornness, and your refusal to break even when the world gave you every reason to. He paused, searching for words. It's been the best time of my life. You've made me remember that there's more to living than just surviving. And whatever happens out there, I want you to know that I don't regret a single moment. Not the auction, not bringing you home, not any of it. Cole, hush. Let me finish. His other hand came up so he was cradling her face between both palms. You're going to be fine. May will take care of you until the marshal comes. And then you're going to go to San Francisco, and you're going to teach those girls, and you're going to build the life you've always wanted. You're going to be extraordinary. I know it. Tears were streaming down Evelyn's face now, and she couldn't stop them. I don't want San Francisco. I don't want any of it if you're not... The words caught in her throat, too big and too frightening to say, but Cole seemed to hear them anyway. Something shifted in his expression, wonder mixing with the resolve. Evelyn, time's up, Mercer. Harding's voice shattered the moment. You coming out, or do we come in? Cole's hands dropped from her face, and he stepped back. The moment of softness vanished, replaced by the hard, focused determination of a man walking into battle. I'm coming, he called back. Then to May. If this goes wrong, you get Evelyn out of here. There's a back trail through the trees, steep but passable on foot. Follow it north for 2 miles, then east to the main road. Flag down the first rider you see and get to the marshal. Cole Mercer, if you get yourself killed, I'll never forgive you, May said, her voice thick with emotion. Then I'd better not get killed. He managed a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. To Evelyn, he said simply, watch from the window. If he tries anything, if any of his men move wrong, you shoot. Understand? Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole walked out onto the porch, down the steps, and into the clearing in front of the cabin. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd faced death before and wasn't afraid of it. His gun hung at his hip, his hand relaxed near the grip. Harding dismounted and walked forward to meet him, leaving his men behind. The two faced each other in the dusty clearing, separated by perhaps 20 feet. From her position at the window, Evelyn could see both men clearly. Harding was taller but leaner, his movements quick and nervous. Cole was solid, planted, his presence seeming to fill the space around him. Fair fight, Harding said. On 3. No tricks. No tricks, Cole agreed. But I want your word. Your men don't interfere. This is between us. Harding glanced back at his companions, then nodded. They won't move. You have my word. The word of a murderer and a slaver. I'll sleep better at night. But Cole's voice held grim humor. All right, Harding, let's get this done. They separated, backing away from each other until the distance between them was perhaps 40 feet. Evelyn's hands tightened on the rifle, her heart in her throat. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to run out there, to stop this, but she remained frozen, watching. May had moved to the other window, her pistol trained on Harding's men. If any of them so much as twitched, she'd fire. The old woman's face was set like stone, but Evelyn could see the fear in her eyes. 1, Harding called out. Cole's hand hovered near his gun, his body absolutely still. 2. Evelyn held her breath. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into an eternity. She could see every detail, the dust motes hanging in the morning air, the way Cole's fingers flexed slightly near his holster, the sweat beading on Harding's scarred face. 3. Both men drew. The shots came simultaneously, 2 cracks that echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. For a moment, both men remained standing, and Evelyn felt hope surge in her chest. Then Harding staggered, his hand going to his shoulder. Blood blossomed across his shirt, bright red against the dusty fabric. Cole stood unwavering, his gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, his shot had been true. But Harding wasn't done. With a roar of rage and pain, he raised his gun for a second shot. And one of his own men shot him. The bullet took Harding in the back, and he went down like a felled tree, his gun falling from his hand. Tom sat on his horse, rifle smoking, his face pale, but determined. Enough, Tom called out, his voice shaking. It's over, Jack. It's been over for a long time. You just couldn't see it. Cole's gun swung to cover the other men, but none of them moved. They sat their horses, hands carefully away from their weapons, clearly wanting no part in further violence. Tom dismounted slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. He walked to where Harding lay gasping in the dust, looked down at his brother with something like pity. You killed Danny, Tom said quietly. Your own nephew. Got him killed because you were too proud to let it go. And you were about to get the rest of us killed too. He looked up at Cole. I'm done. We're all done. Take the girl, keep her safe. Tell the marshal we'll testify about everything. The stagecoach, the murders, all of it. Just let us ride away before the law gets here. Cole studied him for a long moment, his gun still ready but no longer pointed directly at Tom. Where will you go? Mexico, probably. Start over. Try to be better than what we've been. Tom's voice was heavy with regret. I know that doesn't make up for what we've done. Nothing can. But maybe it's something. Maybe, Cole agreed. He lowered his gun slowly. Go. Take your men and go. If I see any of you again, I won't be so generous. Tom nodded and turned back to his horse. The other men were already wheeling their mounts around, eager to be gone. Within moments, they disappeared down the trail, leaving only dust and silence behind. Harding lay in the dirt, bleeding but still breathing. His eyes found Cole, filled with hatred and pain. Should have killed you, he gasped. Probably, Cole agreed. He holstered his gun and walked over, looking down at the man who'd caused so much suffering. But you didn't, and now you get to spend whatever time you have left in a federal prison, thinking about all the lives you destroyed. Go to hell. After you. Cole turned away, dismissing him, and walked back toward the cabin. Evelyn burst through the door before he reached the porch. Throwing herself at him with such force, he staggered back. Her arms went around his neck, and she buried her face against his chest, shaking with the release of fear and relief. You're alive, she whispered. You're alive. His arms came around her, holding her close. I told you I'd be fine. You liar. You were ready to die out there. But I didn't. His hand stroked her hair, and she could feel his heart beating steady and strong beneath her cheek. I'm here. We're both here. It's over. May joined them, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Someone needs to go get the marshal and tell him Harding's here. He's not dead yet, though he might wish he was by the time infection sets in. I'll ride down once I've secured him, Cole said. But first, he gently disentangled himself from Evelyn and went to retrieve rope from the cabin. He bound Harding's wounds to keep him from bleeding out, then tied him securely. The man was already fading in and out of consciousness, the pain and blood loss taking their toll. With Harding secured and no longer a threat, something in the air shifted. The danger that had hung over them like a storm cloud was dissipating, leaving behind exhaustion and the strange, hollow feeling that comes after intense fear. It's really over, Evelyn said, as if testing the words. It's really over, Cole confirmed. He stood, wiping his hands on his pants, and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're safe now. In a few days, once we've dealt with the marshal and the legal proceedings, you can continue to San Francisco, start your new life. The words should have filled her with relief, with anticipation. Instead, they fell on her like stones. San Francisco. The teaching position. The life she'd planned. It all felt suddenly hollow, like reaching for something and finding it turn to dust in her hands. Cole, she started, then stopped, unsure how to put her swirling emotions into words. But May, practical as always, intervened. Let's get back to the ranch before we start making any big decisions. I need a proper bed and a proper meal, and Cole needs actual rest. The future can wait a few more hours. They gathered their belongings, loaded the horses, and began the ride back to the Broken Creek Ranch. Harding was draped over one of the horses, unconscious but stable enough to survive the journey. The morning had turned into afternoon, the sun climbing high and hot, but Evelyn barely noticed. She rode behind May again, but this time her eyes kept finding Cole, watching the way he sat his horse, the set of his shoulders, the profile of his face against the sky. She thought about what he'd said before facing Harding, about the best time of his life, about her being extraordinary. She thought about his hands cradling her face, about the look in his eyes that had been more than just protective concern. And she thought about her own words, the ones that had tried to force themselves out. I don't want San Francisco if you're not there. The truth was simple and terrifying. Somewhere between that auction platform and this moment, between fear and safety, between dying and learning to live again, she'd fallen in love with Cole Mercer. The question now was what she was going to do about it. The Broken Creek Ranch looked exactly as they'd left it, which somehow surprised Evelyn. After everything that had happened, she'd expected the world to look different, to reflect the seismic shifts happening inside her. But the adobe walls stood solid and unchanging. The porch still sagged slightly on the left side, and May's vegetable garden still needed weeding. Charlie and the ranch hands came running when they spotted the returning party, their relief visible even from a distance. When they saw Harding's unconscious form draped over the horse, questions erupted, but Cole silenced them with a raised hand. Later. Right now, lock him in the root cellar and post a guard. Bill Crawford needs to be notified immediately. Charlie, can you ride to town? Already saddling a fresh horse, Charlie said, his weathered face creasing with a grin. Good to see you all back safe, boss. We were starting to worry. As Charlie rode off in a cloud of dust, May headed straight for the house, muttering about needing civilization and a proper cup of tea. Cole began directing the other hands, organizing Harding's confinement and catching up on ranch business that had been neglected during their absence. Evelyn stood in the yard feeling strangely adrift. The danger had passed, the immediate crisis resolved, and now she was faced with the question that had been chasing her since the canyon. What came next? She retreated to her room under the eaves, that small space that had become a sanctuary. Someone had opened the window, letting in fresh air, and the bed was made with clean linens. May's doing, probably, before they'd fled. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands, rougher now than they'd been in Boston, with calluses from work and a healing rope burn on one wrist. These weren't the hands of a schoolteacher anymore. They were the hands of a woman who'd survived, who'd fought, who'd discovered strength she hadn't known existed. But what was she supposed to do with that strength? Take it to San Francisco and pour it into teaching grammar to privileged girls? The idea felt hollow. A knock on the doorframe made her look up. May stood there, 2 cups of tea in her hands. Thought you could use this, May said, offering one of the cups. And maybe some company, if you're willing. Always. Evelyn accepted the tea gratefully, and May settled into the room's single chair with a sigh of relief. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment before May spoke. You're thinking too loud again. I can hear it from downstairs. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. I don't know what to do, May. A month ago, my path was so clear. Now everything's muddled. That's because you're trying to force an old path to fit a new person. May set down her cup, her sharp eyes fixed on Evelyn with knowing sympathy. The woman who left Boston doesn't exist anymore. You can't go back to being her any more than a butterfly can crawl back into its cocoon. But what if I've lost myself? What if everything I worked for, everything I believed in, was just abandoned? You didn't lose yourself, child. You found yourself. There's a difference. May leaned forward. That education you're so proud of? It's still there. Those dreams of making a difference, of teaching, of using your mind, they're still there too. They just might take a different shape than you expected. May, Evelyn's voice caught. I think I've fallen in love with him, with Cole, and I don't know if that's real or if it's just gratitude or trauma or it's real, May interrupted gently. I've seen enough love in my 63 years to recognize it when it's standing right in front of me. The question isn't whether you love him. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose that love when it means changing all your plans. What if I choose wrong? What if I stay and regret it, or leave and regret that instead? Then you'll regret it. That's life, dear. We make choices based on the best information we have, and sometimes we get it wrong. But staying frozen, making no choice at all out of fear, that's the only choice you'll definitely regret. May's words settled over Evelyn like a blanket, comforting and challenging at once. Before she could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching, multiple riders this time. Through the window, Evelyn saw Bill Crawford arriving with 2 other men, one wearing a federal marshal's badge. The marshal had come early. They descended to find Cole on the porch, already greeting the lawmen. The federal marshal was a stern-looking man in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. His name was Samuel Hayes, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who'd been enforcing law on the frontier for decades. Mr. Mercer, Marshal Hayes said, shaking Cole's hand. Deputy Crawford's filled me in on the situation. Quite a story. It's not a story, Marshal. It's what happened. Cole's voice was respectful, but firm. The man responsible is locked in my root cellar. 2 of his accomplices are buried on my property, and the witness to his crimes is here, ready to testify. Hayes turned his attention to Evelyn, his gaze assessing. Miss Ward, I presume. You've had quite an ordeal. Yes, sir? Evelyn stepped forward, drawing on reserves of composure she'd developed over the past weeks. I'm prepared to tell you everything, the stagecoach attack, the murders, my captivity, the auction, all of it. Good. We'll need detailed statements from all of you, but first, I want to see the prisoner. They led the marshal to the root cellar where Harding lay on a makeshift pallet, conscious now but feverish and clearly in pain. When he saw the marshal's badge, something died in his eyes, the last flicker of hope that he might escape justice. Marshal Hayes studied him with clinical detachment. Jack Harding, been chasing you for 2 years. Got a list of charges long enough to hang you twice over. He turned to Cole. He'll survive long enough to stand trial? If infection doesn't set in, I cleaned and dressed the wounds as best I could. Good enough. I'll have a doctor look at him before we transport him to Tucson. Hayes looked at Harding with something like pity. You should have quit while you were ahead, Jack. Should have taken your brother's advice and run for Mexico. Harding said nothing, just closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Over the next several hours, Marshal Hayes took statements from everyone involved. He was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions, cross-referencing accounts, building an airtight case. Evelyn found herself reliving the trauma of the stagecoach attack, describing the men who'd killed innocent people, explaining the 3 days of captivity and fear. But telling it to the marshal felt different than telling it to Cole or May. This was official, on the record, turning her nightmare into legal testimony. It felt like reclaiming power, turning her victimhood into something that could bring justice. When she finished, Hayes set down his pen and regarded her with new respect. Miss Ward, your testimony will put Harding away for life, assuming he lives long enough to stand trial. The other accomplices, too, if we can track them down. You've done a brave thing. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing of all. Hayes gathered his papers. You're free to go wherever you'd like now. The immediate danger has passed. If you need funds for travel or accommodations, the territory can provide assistance for crime victims. The words should have been welcome. Instead, they felt like a door closing. She was free to leave, to continue to San Francisco, to resume the life she'd planned. Everything she'd wanted was suddenly available again. So why did it feel like losing something precious? That evening, after the marshal and his men had taken Harding away, and the ranch had settled into something resembling normalcy, Evelyn found herself on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was performing its nightly miracle, transforming from blue to gold to deep orange, painting the mountains in shades of fire. She heard footsteps behind her and knew, without turning, that it was Cole. Mind if I join you? He asked. It's your porch. Our porch, he corrected quietly, settling into the chair beside hers. For as long as you want it to be. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Finally, Cole spoke again. The marshal said you're free to go, that you can resume your journey to San Francisco. Yes. Is that what you want? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Evelyn thought about the easy answer, the safe answer, the answer she would have given a month ago without hesitation. But May's words echoed in her mind. Staying frozen, making no choice at all out of fear, that's the only choice you'll definitely regret. I don't know, she said honestly. A month ago, I would have said yes without thinking. San Francisco, teaching, building a career, that was everything I wanted. But now you've seen how hard life can be out here, how dangerous, how unpredictable. Cole's voice was carefully neutral, giving her room to speak without pressure. I wouldn't blame you for wanting something more stable, more civilized. That's not what I was going to say. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Cole, I was going to say that now I've seen what it means to be truly alive. Not just existing, not just following a plan someone else made for what a proper educated woman should want, but actually living. Feeling things I've never felt. discovering strength I didn't know I had. Finding, she paused, gathering her courage. Finding someone who sees me as more than just a role to fill. Cole's gray eyes were fixed on her, intense and searching. Evelyn, let me finish, please. She took a breath. In the canyon, before you faced Harding, you told me that these past weeks had been the best time of your life, that I'd made you remember there was more to living than surviving, and I need you to know that you did the same for me. You saved me, Cole, not just from that auction platform, but from a life where I was so focused on one narrow path that I couldn't see any others, where I was so determined to prove I didn't need anyone that I'd forgotten how to let people in. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't want San Francisco if it means leaving you. I'm saying that when I imagine my future now, you're in it. And I know that's terrifying and probably foolish and definitely not what I planned, but it's true. Her voice wavered, but held. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, and I need to know if there's any chance you might feel the same way. The words hung in the evening air, irrevocable and terrifying. Cole stood slowly, and for a heart-stopping moment, Evelyn thought he might walk away, might tell her gently that gratitude wasn't love, that she'd confused rescue with romance. Instead, he held out his hand. Come with me, he said. There's something I want to show you. He led her down the porch steps across the yard to the corral where Silver the gray mare stood, watching them with alert, intelligent eyes. The horse that had been half-starved and terrified when Cole found her was transformed, still healing, but stronger, steadier, no longer flinching at every sound. Remember what I told you about Silver? Cole asked. About how the physical wounds heal faster than the fear? I remember. I didn't tell you the whole story. He rested his arms on the top rail of the corral, his gaze on the mare. When I found her trapped in those rocks, my first thought was to put her down. She was so damaged, so terrified. I figured it would be kinder than trying to save her. But then she looked at me with those eyes, and I saw something that reminded me of myself after Sarah left, after my parents died. That look that says, I'm broken, but I'm still fighting. He turned to face Evelyn, and in the fading light she could see vulnerability in his expression, a lowering of the careful walls he kept around his heart. I saved her because saving her meant maybe I could save myself too. Maybe I could believe that broken things could heal, that scared things could learn to trust again. And then you came along and I saw that same look in your eyes on that platform, that I'm broken but still fighting look. And I knew I had to step forward, had to try to help, because if you could heal, maybe that meant there was still hope for both of us. Cole, I'm not good with words, Evelyn. Never have been. But I need you to understand something. He took her hands in his, calloused palms warm against her skin. When I bought your freedom that day, I told myself it was just the right thing to do. When I brought you home, I told myself it was just temporary protection. When I taught you to shoot and watched you work alongside May and saw you refuse to break no matter what the world threw at you, I told myself I was just being a good host. And what are you telling yourself now? Nothing, because I'm done lying to myself. His hands tightened on hers. I love you, Evelyn Ward. I think I started loving you the moment you stood on that platform bleeding and afraid but still standing straight, still fighting. And it's terrified me because loving someone means risking loss, means making yourself vulnerable. But you were brave enough to say it first, so I figure the least I can do is be brave enough to say it back. Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief, of joy, of something so profound she had no name for it. So what do we do now? That depends. Are you sure about this? Because ranch life isn't easy, Evelyn. It's hard work and early mornings, and dealing with drought and disease and 100 other challenges. It's not the refined intellectual life you trained for. No, it's not, she agreed. It's better, because it's real, and it's mine to choose, not something chosen for me. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I can teach here. May says Promise Creek needs a proper school. I can build a library, start a reading group, use my education to make a difference in this community. I can do all the things I wanted to do, just in a different place. With you. Cole's hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture achingly familiar from that moment before he'd faced Harding. But this time there was no goodbye in it, only beginning. Are you sure? He asked one more time. Because once I kiss you, Evelyn, I'm not letting you go. You'll be stuck with me, with this ranch, this life, this rough country, and everything that comes with it. Promise? She whispered. His smile was the answer, breaking across his face like sunrise. Then he kissed her, and Evelyn understood for the first time what it meant to come home. Not to a place, but to a person. To a feeling of rightness that had nothing to do with plans or propriety, and everything to do with two broken people choosing to heal together. When they finally drew apart, the stars had emerged in full glory overhead, countless points of light in the vast Arizona darkness. From the house, they could hear May singing one of her tuneless songs, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "I don't even know if you've thought about marriage," Evelyn said, suddenly practical even in the midst of emotion. "Or if that's something you'd want. I don't want to assume. Evelyn Ward, are you proposing to me?" Cole's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I'm just clarifying expectations. As an educated woman, I believe in clear communication. As an educated woman, you should know that the man usually does the proposing. This is 1875, Cole Mercer. Women are gaining more rights every year. I can propose if I want to." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and Evelyn realized she'd never heard him laugh like that before. "Fair enough, but in the interest of tradition, let me do this properly." He took both her hands again, his expression turning serious. "Evelyn Ward, will you marry me? Will you stay here at the Broken Creek Ranch, build a life with me, teach our neighbors' children, argue with me about accounting, and remind me that there's more to life than work? Will you let me spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of your courage and your love?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes to all of it. They sealed it with another kiss, longer this time, full of promise and possibility. When they finally returned to the house hand in hand, May took one look at their faces and burst into tears. "About time," she said, wiping her eyes with her apron. "I was beginning to think you two were going to dance around each other forever. Lord knows I've been patient, but a woman my age doesn't have unlimited time to wait for common sense to prevail." "We're getting married," Evelyn announced, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "I should hope so, after all that kissing on the porch. I may be old, but I'm not blind." But May's smile was radiant as she pulled them both into a fierce hug. "Welcome to the family, officially. Now sit down and let me feed you. We have a wedding to plan, and I won't have anyone saying I didn't do it properly." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Word spread through Promise Creek about the upcoming wedding, and the community responded with unexpected enthusiasm. Women Evelyn had never met brought fabric for a dress. Men offered to help build an addition to the ranch house for a proper office where Evelyn could prepare lessons. Children appeared on the porch asking shyly if it was true that a real teacher was staying, if there would really be a school. Evelyn threw herself into planning both the wedding and her new role in the community. She wrote to the Brightwell Academy in San Francisco explaining her situation and formally declining the position. The director's response was surprisingly understanding, wishing her well and noting that the frontier needed good teachers just as much as cities did. She also wrote to her father in Boston. That letter was harder, trying to explain how drastically her life had changed, how the daughter he'd raised to be independent and educated had found both those things in a way he never expected. His response, when it came weeks later, was cautious but not unkind. He didn't understand her choice, but he trusted her judgment and wished her happiness. It was enough. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning in the small church in Promise Creek. May had outdone herself, organizing everything with military precision. Evelyn wore a dress of cream-colored silk that the town seamstress had created from fabric donated by half a dozen families. Cole wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome. Bill Crawford stood as Cole's best man, and May as Evelyn's matron of honor. The church was packed with ranchers and miners, shopkeepers and their families, all the people who made up this rough frontier community. Even Charlie and the ranch hands had cleaned up for the occasion, looking almost civilized in their Sunday best. The ceremony was simple but profound. When the minister asked Evelyn if she took Cole to be her husband, she looked into those steady gray eyes and said, "I do," with absolute certainty. When Cole slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, his hand was steady and sure. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister intoned. You may kiss your bride. Cole did, thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone present. And Evelyn understood that this was her community now, these rough, kind people who'd welcomed her without question, who'd celebrated her survival and her joy. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed the entire territory. Someone produced a fiddle, someone else a guitar, and soon there was music and dancing under the broad Arizona sky. May presided over everything like a benevolent general, making sure everyone was fed and happy. As the sun began to set, painting everything in shades of gold, Cole pulled Evelyn away from the crowd, leading her to a quiet spot near the corral where Silver stood watching them with calm, knowing eyes. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Evelyn said honestly. "A few months ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to a cowboy, living on a ranch in Arizona, planning to teach in a one-room schoolhouse, I would have thought they were insane. And now? Now I think they would have been right. It is insane, but it's also perfect." Cole kissed her temple, the gesture achingly tender. "I have something for you. A wedding gift." He pulled a telegram from his pocket and handed it to her. Evelyn unfolded it, reading by the last light of day. It was from the territorial government, officially approving funding for a school in Promise Creek with Evelyn Ward Mercer listed as the certified teacher. "You did this?" she asked, touched beyond words. "You said you wanted to teach. This way you can, and no one can question your credentials or authority. You're official now, Promise Creek's first real school teacher." He paused. "I know it's not the same as San Francisco. The students will be rougher, the resources limited." "It's better than San Francisco," Evelyn interrupted, "because they're my students, in my community, in my home. This is what I wanted, Cole. Not the prestige or the big city, but the chance to make a real difference. To teach children who need it, who want it, who'll use that education to build better lives." "You're remarkable. Do you know that?" "You keep telling me. Eventually I might believe it." They stood together as the celebration continued behind them, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. In the distance, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to countless human dramas played out in their shadow. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked quietly. "The life you gave up? The plans you changed?" Evelyn thought about it honestly before answering. "Sometimes I wonder what that life would have been like. But regret? No. Because that life would have been safe and predictable and ultimately lonely. This life, our life, is challenging and unpredictable and full of love. I'll take that over safety any day." "Even after everything you went through, the attack, the captivity, the auction?" "Especially because of that." She turned in his arms to face him fully. "Those experiences broke me, yes, but they also showed me who I really am when everything else is stripped away. They taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, braver than I believed, capable of more than I imagined. And they brought me to you, so no, I don't regret any of it, not a single moment." Cole's response was to kiss her again, deeply, completely, in a way that promised forever. When they finally drew apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Evelyn Mercer." "I love you too, Cole Mercer, for all our days." The months that followed were filled with the hard, satisfying work of building a life together. Evelyn opened her school in a building that the community constructed collectively, with Cole and the other ranchers donating labor and materials. On the first day, 15 children showed up, more than she'd expected, ranging in age from 6 to 14, hungry for education and opportunity. She threw herself into teaching with the same determination she'd once applied to surviving. The students were rough around the edges, yes, with grammar that made her wince and spelling that needed serious work. But they were eager, bright, and desperately grateful for the chance to learn. Many of them would be the first in their families to read and write fluently, the first to understand mathematics beyond simple counting, the first to discover that education could open doors they didn't know existed. In the evenings, she helped Cole with the ranch accounts, finally getting them organized in a way that made sense. She wrote letters to her father, describing her new life in detail, slowly building bridges across the distance. She worked alongside May in the garden, learning which plants thrived in the desert climate, how to preserve food for the harsh winters, all the practical knowledge that turned a house into a home. And at night, she fell asleep in Cole's arms, safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. A year after the wedding, on a warm spring evening, Evelyn stood on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset. Her hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, feeling the flutter of new life growing within her. In 9 months, there would be a child, their child, to love and teach and raise in this wild, beautiful land. Cole joined her, his hand covering hers over their baby. Thinking about the future, he asked. Thinking about the past, actually. About the woman who stood on an auction platform bleeding and terrified, certain her life was over. Wondering what she would think if she could see me now. What would she think? Evelyn smiled, watching the sky paint itself in impossible colors. I think she'd be amazed and proud, and maybe a little envious because she couldn't imagine that loss could lead to gain, that destruction could lead to creation, that the worst day of her life could be the beginning of the best years. Any regrets? Only that I wasted so much time planning a future I thought I wanted, instead of being open to the future I needed. She turned to face him, this man who'd bought her freedom and given her love, who taught her that strength came in many forms and love could be both fierce and gentle. But no real regrets. Not about this life, this place, this love. Cole's arms came around her, holding her and their unborn child, and Evelyn rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Around them, the ranch settled into evening, horses moving in the corral, May's voice calling them to dinner, the first stars beginning to emerge. She thought about that August day when Cole had stepped forward and said those words that changed everything. She's mine to protect. How that promise of protection had evolved into partnership, how rescue had transformed into love, how a stranger had become family. And as the last light faded from the Arizona sky and lamplight glowed warm in the windows of their home, Evelyn understood that sometimes the best stories were the ones you never planned, the ones that found you when you were lost and showed you the way home. Come on, Cole said, pressing a kiss to her hair. May's made your favorite, and you know she gets cranky when we let the food get cold. They walked into the house together, hand in hand, ready for dinner and conversation and all the small, precious moments that made up a life well lived. Behind them, the door swung closed on the darkness, shutting out the past and all its pain, leaving only light and love and the promise of tomorrow. In the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon, its voice carrying across the desert like a song. And in the warm glow of the ranch house, surrounded by laughter and love, Evelyn Ward Mercer understood that she had found something far more valuable than the life she'd planned. She had found home. She had found herself. And she had found a love worth protecting for all their days to come. The end.